been reporting today about just what you're talking about the crackdown on how this is being reported in Russia, making sure Russian media toes a certain line. You said there that part of what you want to do is penetrate the Russian media landscape. How do you do that?
The Ukrainian armed forces have launched a special helpline for the Russian mothers to keep track of, to find their children. Also, there was a leak of the Russian military, which was published in Ukraine. A lot of the information is being now verified, but the idea is to actually get across to the families who sent their men fighting in Ukraine, so that they can find them either dead or alive. But that's the whole idea. They're also prisoners of war, which get an access to communicate the messages to their family. As you know, many of them were expecting that they will be greeted here with flowers. Many of them didn't expect such a fierce resistance. What they are seeing here, everybody hates them, and civilians are joining the armed forces to kill them. This is something which we're now seeing here.
All right, we have to leave it there for time. Thank you very much for joining us, Vasyl Miroshenko, from Volochysk.
I was happy to be with you. Thank you.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor says an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine will start straight away. The investigation is backed by nearly 40 countries, including EU member states, the UK, Australia and Canada. The ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, says there's reasonable basis to believe that war crimes have been committed. The US president has hailed the approval by the UN General Assembly, a resolution that deplores Russia's Ukraine invasion. Joe Biden says the number of countries that supported the motion shows a world largely united against Moscow.
A vote in the United Nations to condemn Putin. 141 countries voted to do that in the UN General Assembly. Several abstained. China abstained. Didn't vote with them, but abstained. India abstained. 7 countries abstained, I think it was the number. They're alone. And they did what they did, in my view. He did what he did because he thought he could split NATO, split Europe, and split the United States. We're going to demonstrate to the whole world, no one can split this country.
All right, from the UN, Kristen Salumi has more on that emergency session, the first since 1997.
Ukraine came to the General Assembly arguing that Russian aggression is a violation of the UN Charter, as well as a deadly existential threat.
They have come to the Ukrainian soil not only to kill some of us, not only to shift our course and priorities. They have come to deprive Ukraine of the very right to exist.
Here, Russia has no veto power, just the power to make its case, even in the face of enormous opposition.
Your refusal to support today's draft resolution is a vote for a peaceful Ukraine, free from radicalism and neo-Nazism.
In the end, only 4 member states sided with the Russians, 141 voting in favor of the resolution, deploring the military operation.
Today, the world has spoken with a clear, united voice. Together, the vast majority of the world has condemned Russia's unprovoked, unjustified, unconscionable war. We have deplored Belarus for allowing its territory to be used to facilitate this aggression.
35 countries abstained from voting, among them China, India, and South Africa.
The resolution that we have considered today does not create an environment conducive for diplomacy, dialogue, and mediation.
However, the United Arab Emirates, which had abstained on a similar resolution in the Security Council, came out in favor.
Right now, we recognize that this resolution adopted here today is a necessary signal of where we need to be going. Resigning ourselves to a cycle of perpetual violence and sanctions that only adds to the suffering of civilians diminishes us all.
Under international law, matters of peace and security are the purview of the Security Council. But the Council invoked a rarely used provision of the UN Charter to get around the Russian veto and call for this special emergency session of the General Assembly. Its outcome, according to sponsors, shows Russia's isolation on the international stage. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
To some other news now, and thousands of Indian students in Canada have been left stranded by the sudden closure of 3 colleges. They're the latest higher learning institutions in Quebec province to be investigated for their admission practices. Sending students abroad is big business in India, especially in Punjab. And as our India correspondent Elizabeth Puranam reports, some students are being scammed.
Avneet Modi and her parents try to figure out how to recover the nearly $12,000 they've lost in tertiary education fees in Canada. The college Avneet was supposed to go to in Montreal is one of 3 which declared bankruptcy this month and closed.
I'm in a big mess right now because it was my father's money. He earned a lot with so hard work, and now I'm like, I have wasted all that money because I forced my father that I want to go abroad and want to study, I want to live freedomly, independently.
23-year-old Avneet and others like her in cities throughout Punjab have been protesting and appealing to the Indian government to help them get a refund. The government in Quebec province is investigating the admission practices of the 3 colleges which shut down. Another 10 colleges were suspended last year while investigators checked whether they were admitting international students who didn't meet English language requirements and also squeezing the mandatory 20 study hours a week into 2 to 3 days so that students could find a job for the rest of the week. Sending students abroad is big business in India, with agents taking hefty commissions from students' fees. More than 500,000 Indian students travel abroad for their tertiary studies every year, but researchers say less than a third are admitted to established universities. The others go to what are considered substandard colleges in their attempts to get citizenship, or they're deceived by people posing as education agents. Al Jazeera requested an interview with Avneet's agency, but they refused.
So you don't need an agent.
Police in the city of Patiala told Al Jazeera that the desire to go overseas makes many fall for false promises rather than doing their own research.
Verify the credentials of the agents or the educational institutes that are claiming that they'll get you employment or they'll get you admission in the colleges and universities abroad.
But immigration and education consultants who are accredited by foreign governments say the problem is that anyone is allowed to start a study abroad agency in India.
Having a license doesn't mean that this person is qualified. License only means your premises have been identified as having an office. There's no checking of qualifications by the government to see if someone is capable of doing the work.
David and many others are calling on the Indian government to regulate the massive industry, while Avneet and thousands like her try to get their families' life savings back. Elizabeth Puranam, Al Jazeera, Patiala, Punjab.
500,000 people in the Sydney area have been told to leave or be ready to escape flooding after torrential rains hit a long stretch of Australia's east coast. The Bureau of Meteorology is warning of life-threatening flash flooding. And on the other side of Australia, its largest state has opened its borders to the rest of the country for the first time in nearly 2 years. There were tearful reunions at the airport in the city of Perth, the capital of Western Australia. The state isolated itself from the rest of the country and the world at the beginning of the pandemic in April 2020. Right, it's time now for sport. Here's Farah.
Kim, thank you so much. Russian and Belarusian athletes have now been banned from the Beijing Paralympics for their country's role in the war in Ukraine. The International Paralympic Committee made the announcement on Thursday, less than 24 hours after the IPC announced it would allow Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete under neutral flags. The committee was heavily criticized for its initial decision, with participating countries saying the IPC fell short. Spokesman for the Kremlin has called the decision an outrage and disgraceful. Well, the president of the IPC, Andrew Parsons, released a statement saying to the para-athletes from the impacted countries, we are very sorry that you were affected by the decisions your governments took last week. You're victims of your government's actions. We've been speaking to the executive director of the World Players Association, Brendan Schwab. He says the sanctions were needed to show that sport is doing the right thing.
It's important that these sanctions are targeted at the source of the problem, and that is the Russian state. Now, clearly the Russian state has a deep control over the Russian Olympic Committee, and to that extent, the Paralympic Committee. Now, there's no doubt that sanctions on the committees will involve an exclusion of the athletes from the games. But disappointingly as that may be, it is a small price to pay for sport to be seen to be doing the right thing, and that is imposing targeted and powerful sporting sanctions. We did see, of course, in relation to sport's response to the problem of apartheid in South Africa, that South African athletes were excluded as a consequence of sporting sanctions. Now, sporting sanctions may not have been decisive, of course, in help turning around the situation in apartheid South Africa, but they were important. And it's now essential that sanctions on the part of the sports movement play an important role, even if they may not yet be decisive in bringing about peace in the Ukraine.
Chelsea's Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, has put the Premier League club up for sale, saying proceeds from any deal will be donated to war victims in Ukraine. Russia's invasion of the country has complicated the billionaire's ownership of the team. Sohail Malik reports.
Despite booking a spot in the FA Cup quarter-finals, there was a somber look on the faces of Chelsea's players on Wednesday night. That's because behind the scenes, the Blues are facing their most uncertain period in recent history. Before their match, Chelsea owner Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich announced he plans to sell the club.